listening, hear me. I may not pass this way again.
Hello and welcome to the Robert Lane Creative Careers Podcast, the podcast about creativity and making a living in the arts. This episode of the podcast features a conversation with improviser, writer and performer Pippa Evans. Before we hear my conversation with Pippa, I'd just like to play you a bit of this. It's my new song, A Lover or a Friend, which is only available to download and stream on Bandcamp. I've chosen Bandcamp because I feel they're the best streaming site, and they've also done a lot to help artists during the pandemic. Find more information about this song and the other projects that I'm working on at robertlanemusic.co.uk. Thank you.
A lover or a friend, someone to tell your lies to now. The night has grown so cold. A keepsake or a limb, it makes no difference to you now that your heart has been bought and sold. I wish you would see me sometimes, learn what I've got to give. Wishing these moments with you is how I want to live. Do you want or need?
I'm on a mission to help you unlock your creativity. I'm sharing my journey as a musician, actor and writer, as well as offering online content like guitar and songwriting tutorials and chat about creativity. I'm doing this because I know how important creativity is for mental health, and I believe everyone has a creative spirit. I want to help you find yours. Join me at robertlanemusic.co.uk and on social media as Robert Lane Music. Thank you. Hi Pippa, how are you?
I'm very good. I'm sat on my carpet, which is on my floor. It's not rolled up, and the sun is shining, so that's always makes everything better. And I'm feeling pretty chipper for someone locked in their house. That's
good. Getting so used to it, I suppose. Whereabouts are you in the world? Where is home?
So I'm in Stockwell in South London. So here's an interesting fact. It's actually, so it's called Stockwell because it's where there used to be a well where people would bring their stock to have a drink.
Some of these stories are so impossible to believe, aren't they?
Well, the reason I find it interesting is because like nothing happens in Stockwell really in terms of like it's a travelling through place. People go, oh, is that near Clapham? Is that near Brixton? Is that near Vauxhall? And that's because people their animals passing through to those more substantial places. Mm. So anyway, I don't know why I decided to say that, but I thought it was
a commuter
nice.
town for livestock. That's cool.
Yeah, it's like a holiday inn for livestock.
Great. And what is sort of a normal day looking like at the moment for you then? Because you were involved in so much live performance, I think, up until I guess March last year. In fact, I was just watching the live stream that happened on the last night of the Showstopper when you couldn't do it.
Oh yeah.
But you were all set, ready to go, so you did it as a live stream, which did that seem like quite a novelty that first night, and then you've had to sort of do more?
Yeah, because we were backstage and they said we have to close. The theatre said we have to close. We can't let the audience come in, and I think they announced that at 6:00, and the show was supposed to be at 7:30. And I just went, let's just live stream it. Let's live stream something because we're here and we're the only show in the West End who can do that because we don't have any legal rights. There's no one owns this other than us, and it's made up. So but I mean, if you watch it, you can kind of see that we're kind of in a panic straight. And also, we're so used to live streaming now. Like the two guys holding the cameras, the phones, they're holding them up portrait instead of landscape. We all know that's illegal in live streaming. So very, very funny learning lessons. But yeah, it was really funny. And now, of course, we've got this incredible setup, which Andrew Pugsley, one of our team, created, where we improvise musicals, but we're sat in full like chairs with a camera on our face. So it's a completely different way of doing it. Yes, that's live streaming. But my day, which was the actual question. But like you say there, so I didn't have any live work, and then I was very lucky to be offered to write a book, so I wrote a book about improv during lockdown, which meant just getting up every day and sitting and writing, which is very disciplined actually. And I was grateful for it because, to be honest, it is hard. I think it's very hard to be inspired in this time, especially when we're only, particularly in this lockdown time, if you're just in your one space, you're looking at the same thing. You can't have like a holiday in the diary, not even like a weekend in Brighton. So I think that's hard. But my husband's very good. My husband has what I call a normal job, and he has to get up. So I have to get up. So that's good. Sometimes we do a Joe Wicks. Sometimes I go for a run. Sometimes I say I'm not doing either of those things. I'm going to lie in bed. and then I've been reading a lot recently, or writing. And then we say, what should we have for lunch? And then we have lunch. And then I say, I'm going to do some more reading, or I'm going to do some writing. And then we say, what should we have for dinner? And then we generally watch an episode of Friends, which we seem to have rewatched the whole of during lockdown. We've gone definitely into a 90s safety cocoon.
I was going to ask you all about writing a book and stuff, but let's talk about Friends. When you when you rewatch those now, they're still great, I think, or most of them are. But it's that whole how the zeitgeist thing has changed, hasn't it? There's some very interesting things in Friends that I kind of had forgotten until rewatching it as a sort of person in their 30s. Do you know what I mean? So like the whole, it's slightly homophobic sometimes, isn't it? And
I wouldn't say slightly even.
Okay, it's out there.
So it's a brilliant, hilarious. The comedy is brilliant. It's really well written. I love them as a group of people.
The performances are great always, aren't they?
I think Phoebe is the most brilliant character. And what I love about Phoebe is she's completely bonkers, but she completely belongs. I've just rewatched the episode with the Christmas trees where she gets upset that Christmas trees, like old ones, go in the chipper. Yeah. And the episode ends, spoiler alert, with them getting all of the old Christmas trees and bringing them into Monica's flat so that they're all saved and get their Christmas tree. And it really moved me rewatching it because I was like, yeah, that is a group of friends who think their friend is bonkers but love her so much they're going to fill their flat with trees. And I just thought, wow, that's beautiful. But the homophobia is really interesting. And I suppose, again, growing up in the 90s, I'm like, yeah, I remember that. I remember that being the joke. You're gay. And it's so prevalent. So it's not even like, it's not even like, oh, we're doing an edgy gay joke. It's like two men touch. I mean, they literally touch. They put their hands on each other. Chandler and Joey mostly. And then they go, oh, God, no, people, oh. And it's just an implied punchline of people will think we're gay. Yeah.
It's interesting. It's interesting as well because it's not, oh, we laugh at them because they can't handle, they're not in touch with how they feel about things. We're not laughing at them. It's literally, oh, that's funny. The two men have touched, and we all must think that's strange. Yeah. It's weird, isn't it? But this is the way things change, isn't it? Does that ever cross your mind with stuff that you improvise, like stuff that you might do off the top of your head? Not that you're a raging homophobe, obviously, but there might be something that you say. Maybe you are. We've only just met. I don't know. Is there something that you might say in a show that sort of 10 or 15 years later? Do you see what I mean? Just in general with things that we write and create.
No, I know exactly what you mean. I mean, the good thing about it is it disappears.
Yeah.
So I can have a horrible memory of things that have been said or done on a stage, but I don't have to have it replayed, which is, a real gift. And I say that all at the time, it might not have been something that we would have considered rude or racist or homophobic or whatever. But now, as we learn and as we grow, we suddenly go, oh my God, these things that we thought were innocent things aren't innocent things. So I'm thinking about homophobia in terms of when we first started, it would always be heterosexual relationships. And then if there were two men kissing, usually, if two men got together, it would be a punchline. And it wouldn't necessarily be intended as a punchline, but the audience would laugh if two men kissed. So we actually worked to make sure that actively, if we had homophobic relationship. I was about to say homosexual relationship. That it wasn't that it was done with genuine love and commitment, rather than look at me, I'm playing someone who's gay. And I think because we are as a group pretty heteronormative, so yeah, just checking in. Oh, well, these things that we don't even think we do, but we might do them, or we might do them without thinking that we're doing them. Yeah.
It's interesting, isn't it? Because obviously we never quite know how the zeitgeist is going to change with things that are current anyway. That's the problem, in it. We like to think that we're very knowledgeable and we're so much brighter and well educated compared to our predecessors, but of course we're not really, because things change and things move, I guess. Yeah,
and if you think, in many ways, the Friends is really forward in so many ways in terms of like, you could say in terms of like feminism. They're strong women. They're talking about their sex lives. They've got their careers. That's very 90s feminism. However, the ending, when Ross says, "Don't go to Paris, Rachel, and follow your dreams. Stay here with me," and she says, "Okay," rewatching that is just heartbreaking. Going, oh my God, how many people has this program trained into thinking that actually you can follow your dreams, but the most important thing is to have a man on your arm. Yeah. So that's kind of fascinating that it was groundbreaking, and yet when we look back at it, we go, oh gosh, I wonder, because remember how many people watched that show? It was massive. That its impact is huge. Ross is a horrible man. Like, he's horrible. He's the worst boyfriend. He's so jealous and childish, and I think, God, but I watched that when I was a teenage girl. I'm sure I would have thought that was okay. That's what love is. It's having someone being paranoid and obsessed with you. That's messed up, isn't it?
Yeah, it is a bit. It's for me. It's the Chandler. So watching it when at the time, it's like, Chandler's so cool. He's so funny, and then you just think, what a pain in the arse he'd be to be around all the. Just have a fucking conversation, would you, without any of this gagging, you loser. But yeah,
I love Chandler so much, and I don't find him annoying at all. But I tell you what's really distressing watching it is now we know that Matthew Perry at that time was going through a massive drug addiction, and you watch it back and you're like, he is so unwell, and he says he doesn't remember 2 years of Friends because he was just on was he on amphetamines, I think. But you just watch it going, this poor man is suffering, and we were just going, oh, it's so fun. The studio would have just been covering it up because that's what you do, And I wonder how much you could hold them accountable as well. But anyway, it's great. Anyway, Friends, but it's still worth watching because it is very comforting and there's lots of hilarity in it. I think it's one of those ones where it's like you don't need to stop watching it. You need to be aware of what you're watching in terms of the things that have changed.
And for jokes per scene as well, it always seems like it's still a pretty high hit rate, I think.
Oh, incredible level of jokes, an incredible level of hilarious jokes. Not, it's quite funny. Yeah. Like,
Great. Okay, so with the book then, was this was it a project that you had in mind for a while, or was it an approach and that somebody came with, or?
Well, it was. So I've been working with improvisation for 15 years as a professional, but I've been studying it for about 20, and the thing I love about it is how much it teaches about. Excuse me, I just had to burp. How much it teaches us about how to get through and embrace life. So even the fact that I started saying get through is not quite what I mean. It's like be in life rather than trying to get life right. Let's get life right. So I've been teaching a course called Improv Your Life for 7 or 8 years. And then people had said, we'd love you to write a book. And I said, yeah, I should write a book. And then I just never got around to writing the book, or I'd start doing it and go, oof, that's hard. and then I was just very, very fortunate that Hodder Books got in touch with my agent just before lockdown and said, I don't suppose any of your clients want to write a book about something. And I was like, me. And so literally a week into lockdown or 2 weeks in, they said, we'd love you to write this book. And what a gift that was, because as you've already said, I used to do a huge amount of live work. and that's all been taken away. So I was given something to focus on and to be able to do in that time. And it was something I wanted to do rather than, okay, I'm going to have to do this to pay my bills. It was like, oh, here's this amazing coincidence, synchronicitous opportunity.
Fantastic. And it's, I've spoken to so many people for this who've sort of said the same kind of thing, that lockdown obviously has been hard and shit, but it has allowed them to do some projects that wouldn't have happened otherwise. I guess this might have happened eventually otherwise, but having that block of time to do it, I guess, was very helpful.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's a block of time, and also because the problem is, because my husband said, I don't know if you'd be able to write this book even if they'd offered you this book and the pandemic had never happened. I don't think you would have made proper enough time for it. I think you would have been like, yeah, I'll write in the morning, and in the afternoon I'll go and and in the evening I would have been trying to squish it in. So just having the gift of time for it was, absolute a godsend. And that's the thing about the pandemic is it's been, like you say, shit. But we have to, for our sanity, look to it and say, right, okay, what was it? What was good? What was helpful? What did I gain from it? Mm-hmm. Just because otherwise we'll be going, I lost a year of my life. It's like, well, no, I lost a year of live work, but I got space to write a book.
Mm. And the improv your life element then. So I've been involved with sort of some improv and stuff around here in Birmingham. So like short form games night type stuff. And then at one point I was involved with a group who were doing long form improvised musicals actually, and Sherlock Holmes stories and Charles Dickens and all this kind of stuff. And I was doing it as an actor and as a musician because I knew that it would provide some of the useful skills for me or encourage some useful abilities. And it has in everyday life, partly this fact of however bad things go, it will probably be okay, because I've been on stage in those situations where it's gone very, very badly, and it's like, it's okay, you can either get past it or it doesn't matter. So that in itself has been useful. Are those the kind of life skills that you discuss in the book?
Exactly. So you can look at it sort of on two levels, if you like. You can look at it on the level of idea creation, so that kind of being productive. So you can think of it if you work in a creative industry, or you work in a job where you're constantly having to come up with new ideas about things. And improv is the best gift you could ever learn because it's so helpful in that sense. But I think a lot of work is done on like how it's helpful in a work sense, but in a sort of bigger expansive sense, improv just teaches you to keep expanding your boundary lines, like, okay, and checking in, what am I saying yes to, what am I saying no to, how am I responding to people's offers? So anyone who's not done improv will not, the shorthand for what someone says to you is an offer. So if I say, hello, Mr. Butcher, 6 sausages, please. My offer is, you are now a butcher and I would like 6 sausages. So how do we respond to those offers? And we talk about blocking, which is where you just go, I'm not a butcher. I'm your mother. Go to bed. You've been naughty. That's a block. I've denied your reality. And also just standing and being frozen. Like, why am I, we freeze because we don't think we can think of anything because we don't trust ourselves. So a lot of improvisation is about learning to trust yourself, trust your ideas, trust your gut. Like, I don't know if you had this experience when you were improvising, but that moment where you're like, I know I need to leave the stage, but for some reason, I'm not going to. I'm just going to stand here and die slowly inside.
Yeah.
And so, and again, in life happens all the time. We're like, I need to leave this relationship. I need to leave this job. I need to literally leave this party. It doesn't have to be as big as those other examples. But I'm going to stay here for another hour and a half and slightly die inside. So just being able to learn to trust your skills and your gut is a wonderful thing that improv can give you.
A big moment for me once when I was doing some improv was this block of saying the first thing that comes into your head. It's like, well, you've thought of it, so it must be really obvious. It's not going to interest anybody. And somebody said to me, no, actually, your obvious isn't the same as somebody else's obvious. And particularly if you work with quite a diverse group of people, what they're going to say that comes first into their head will be completely different to what you'd have thought. And I'm always sort of second guessing that, certainly like as a music performer as well. You kind of feel you can read an audience and know what they're thinking. But there's a danger in that, isn't there? Because you don't know what an individual's thinking, and really the only way to find out is to do something and see what they react to.
Yeah, absolutely. And so in my book, there's a whole chapter called "Follow Your Obvious,"
and
that's really, it's a really good point. Like, because your obvious is not someone else's obvious, and also if you follow your obvious, the audience can see why you've made that move, even if they don't even understand it. Like, so even if I said banjo, and your response was tree, because it's true to you, I would be able to see that you have a connection between those two things, right? Whereas if I say banjo and you go tree, oh God, and then you go into your head and think, okay, well, what should I say that's really clever? Oh, Steve Martin, right? So because of this big gap where you've tried to think of something clever, you've lost the connection with the performer and the audience, because we've seen you go into a space where you're saying, I must get it right. Yeah. So I think following your obvious is really important. And the fact that I think one of the most magical things, like you say, if you work with a diverse group particularly, but in any group, most likely if I said banjo, everybody would come out with a different word. Some people might have the same idea. So we have a problem with not following our obvious and being ashamed if someone else says the same idea as you. Like, that's a bad thing. It's like, no, that's a really beautiful thing. The two of you have been inspired in the same space. That means you two can develop this idea even more, rather than be like, oh, I'm so unoriginal. It's like, being original is just such a curse of a wish. So follow your obvious, stop trying to be brilliant, and say it out loud.
Yeah, I love it. And the great thing for me about improv as well is the ability to collaborate. So, because you haven't, rehearsed. And I know that we do rehearse, but you know what I mean? You haven't got to do it in quite the same way. You can get on, in theory, you can get on stage with someone as long as you know the format and the rules of whatever it is that you're doing. You can make something happen, like how musicians can improvise together. And that is kind of quite unique, I think, to an improv situation, isn't it, I guess?
Yeah. Well, I think, again, we are in more situations where we are collaborating without realizing it. And if we all learn to improvise, we might just recognize the language of it a bit better. So really our parliamentary members should all be learning to improvise, because they are literally in the middle of a place where they're having to make things up as they go along. And it feels like those aren't necessarily connected moments. And that, but the problem is, of course, improv is often connected to comedy. So people go, oh, well, it's not useful as a skill. I don't need to be a comedian. It's like, well, let's get rid of the word comedy and just think about the word improvisation, meaning using what's available to you in the moment, or working with what's available to you in the moment. Because even when we say making it up on the spot, sounds like anyone can do it. It's like, yeah, anyone can do it if they've done the training. Like if they've done some rehearsals, like footballers, they do their sit-ups and they do their knee-ups and they run around a field, learn how to play football, and then when they go out and actually play another team, that's when they're improvising. So the collaboration is a really important part of the training, because I don't know how much training you did, but usually in the first time someone comes to a workshop, they fall into usually two categories, either the over-joiner-inner or the under-joiner-inner. So you get someone who's either like, I'm going to be in every scene, I'm going to be really helpful, I'm going to be amazing. And actually they're not making any space for anyone else. And then the other person who doesn't join in because they're so worried that they're not going to be able to support someone's idea. Oh, you've probably got a better idea than I have. Oh, I'll wait till you say what you're going to say. So I'm definitely supporting you. So you're not putting yourself in the space, you're just there. You're just there, but you're not adding to it. So you will leave feeling like, oh, I was part of it, but I didn't really join in. I didn't feel like I put my thread through it, as it were.
So I'll be interested to know a little bit about. So when you have groups on the circuit, like Ostentatious, Showstopper, these groups that seem to be just everyone's heard of them, and all the other groups sort of aspire to be doing what they're doing. I just, as someone who was involved in that from the start, as far as I know, with Showstopper, how did that position come about? What were the steps that sort of led to being an industry leader? Is that the right way to put it? I don't know.
An industry leader, that's how we like to be called. before any corporate, we say, please welcome industry leaders. The showstoppers. No, that's very kind. And we do strive to improvise a musical to the standard of the West End. And I think that is one of the big game changers, was people coming along and saying, I want... So we used to work with Ken Campbell, who's this amazing theatre director,
cool.
Maverick. Have you heard of him?
Yeah.
He's, super duper, completely bonkers, amazing, inspiring man. And he used to say, if you're going to make it up, it better be better than if it was written down.
Mm.
So that was kind of our mantra, if you like. So we know that we're not going to improvise. We're not going to put it on stage if it couldn't be mistaken for a West End musical. Ostentatious, Carrie Ad-Lloyd, who's in Ostentatious, also worked with Ken. So there is a bit of a thread. Adam Megiddo, who's the artistic director of Showstopper, is the guest director of Ostentatious and also the guest director of Mischief Movie Night, which is another one. So you can see there is a common thread of professional actor, director, man with experience in the West End, requesting that improvisation allows itself to be professional, because I think it's not that ability's not been there before. It's almost like we've apologized for our stuff and hidden it in pubs and hidden it in small spaces, and actually we went, fuck you guys, we're going to do it on the big stage with big lights and shiny things, and we're going to win Olivier's. Okay, bye. So I think the ambition it was there, but also everybody in Showstopper is trained as an actor or singer or comedian or musician. So we also have people who have West End experience in musical theatre running the show. And I think that's a big difference. So it's not the danger sometimes we get with improvisation is I'm an improviser, therefore I can do anything, rather than I've got experience in Shakespeare, for example. I'm going to do an improvised Shakespeare show. It's like we go, oh, well, I'll just read one play and I'll improvise. And I say that for myself because I used to try and improvise Shakespeare and be like, why is it not working? It's like, probably because you hate Shakespeare and you don't really know any of it. It's like, oh, it's interesting. It's interesting, isn't it? Interesting that I can't do it because I hate it.
And how important do you think it is to have I don't want to say US, I keep using all this corporate speak, a USP.
Please.
A unique selling point, or something that, say, you can point to and say that's what that show is. So Ostentatious is an improvised Jane Austen. So you know, even though it's made up, you know pretty much what that's going to be. An improvised musical, you kind of know what that's going to be. Has that been useful? Because, I mean, we've all had the experience of being on the Royal Mile or whatever in Edinburgh and trying to flyer a show that's, oh, well, it's this and it's a bit of that and it's this. It's quite hard to sell something that's, oh, we do everything.
Well, yeah, I think it's really clear sell. So, I mean, but it's a clear sell to say we're an improv group. We improvise sketches. What's not a clear sell is when people go, I'm an improv group, and we improvise Harolds. And then people go, what's a Harold? You go, oh, well, it's a, oh, that's what it is. 1984. We're in Chicago. Yeah, like and so we're already in improv internal land, rather than going, right, how can we get people who aren't interested in improvisation interested in the show? So it's actually, so the USB is really just going, well, what's this show about? And because improv is a tag on skill, like a bolt on skill, it kind of needs some format, even if that format, like I say, is comedy sketches, so that the audience knows what you're going to improvise. Because if you say, come and see this improv show, they go, oh, what do you do? Oh, we just improvise. What do you mean you just improvise? We just improvise. It could be anything, couldn't it? I could improvise. It could be poems. It could be, I improvise maths. I improvise, so just being really clear about what it is you're improvising. Because really improvising any kind of theatre or comedy is a sort of a homage. It's an instant way of writing. I think that's a good way to think of it. What are you instantly writing for this audience?
And that's an interesting point, actually, because I wanted to also talk about when you've been involved with scripted things, and so like your stage shows and your character shows, which I assume are a more scripted affair. Yeah, you nod, you never know. How much does the improv side of things work in the actual writing a show like that? Do you know what I mean? Are you improvising in rehearsal and then that's becoming a written thing, or is it sitting and writing? Is it a bit of a crossover?
It's a bit of a crossover for me, and I think sometimes improv is really helpful for that, because it helps you get through the, oh, this is terrible stage, because you're used to doing a first draft. That's what you do every time you perform, you're doing a first draft. So just going, okay, I'm just going to write for half an hour, and whatever comes out, I'm going to pick out the bits that are useful. I'll tell you what's not helpful about is your bit of your brain is always thinking, just make it up. Just make it, you'll be all right. Just make it up. You don't need to learn this. Just make it up. So I find refining scripts really hard, because I have to make myself do it, because a bit of me, my little arrogant ego side, incorrectly believes I could improvise a pitch perfect stand-up show.
I'm sorry to interrupt the conversation at this point, but I wondered if I could ask if you might possibly consider subscribing to the podcast, rating it, and writing a review on your favourite podcast provider. Doing these wonderful things encourages the all-powerful algorithms to push the podcast to new people. It's also helpful when I'm talking to potential future guests, as it shows that people are listening. Thank you. So when you're on stage for a scripted show, so for a one-woman show, character show, whatever, if something occurs to you in the moment whilst performing, do you give yourself the permission to go with that, or do you try not to?
No, I'll definitely go with it. My problem will be, because my memory is bad, which again, I think a lot of improvisers have this problem, is your memory goes, because you improvise so much content that your brain goes, okay, right, so we just, at the end of this show, I don't need to remember that, gone. So I find it really hard. So what will happen is, I'll be like, oh, Robert, he's got great headphones. Let's talk about your headphones. And then in my head, I'll be going, what's next? Where did you have to be? So when Ishani was playing, Ishani Parampanagan plays piano for me, she would on her keyboard, I would have to have stuck a bullet points of what I was doing. But then I was thinking, it's so weird, isn't it? Like when you watch a band play, you're very happy to see their set list on the floor. But when you see a stand-up, it's almost offensive, because your job as a stand-up is to pretend that you're making it up. But as an improviser, I find that offensive, because my job as an improviser is to make it up. So therefore, if I'm faking making it up, I'm doing a disservice to the people who are actually making it up.
It's mad, isn't it, the way we put stuff in boxes? Like the thing of like improv, from my experience, maybe I'm wrong, doesn't really work in comedy clubs in quite the same way that stand-up does. And it needs a different setting, perhaps. Am I wrong? Or?
No, I don't think you're not wrong. I think, but it has to be set up, so it can work. So, for example, the Noise Next Door, who are fabulous, hilarious. They do Jongleurs and all the comedy chain clubs, and they do brilliant sets. But it is like punchline. It's like machine gun improv, So I would say it can. It will shape your show. What won't so you don't do Showstopper on Friday night at Jongleurs. You don't go, hey guys, we just take 20 minutes to improvise a musical for you. So I think there's definitely a thing about the setting, but it comes back to knowing what you're delivering. So as an improv group who are doing a stand-up night, and to be fair, like when I started, which would have been 2004 or 5, we used to do short form games in pubs and clubs. So it can and does work. But it's very specific, fast fire jokes. Whereas if you've learnt more long form, or you want to do something more theatrical, it's just not the place to be.
And where in Showstoppers history was the children's show? How soon did that come along? Because I think one of my favourite ever experiences of watching an improv show was a kids show that you guys did, just because of the mad suggestions that the kids were. So as crazy as adults might try and be with their silly suggestions and throw things out to throw you off. Kids are just saying crazy stuff, but not to throw you off, it seems, just because that's what's coming to their head. So suddenly you're like, yeah, okay, we were in a hot air balloon and now we're in the centre of Mars. That's fine. We can do that. That's cool.
Yeah.
So where did that kind of, in the development of the show?
They're so amazing, kids. We love doing that show so much. And one of the worst things about the pandemic for us as a show has been that when we could do theatre for a bit, we couldn't do the kids show because they couldn't shout out. So there was no way for us to get the suggestions. So it would have been awful. We would have probably cried the whole way through. Anyway, we started. So we did shows in Edinburgh. So I feel like maybe 2010 or 11, maybe we did a few kids shows, but they were kind of like matinees of the adult show.
Yeah.
And they were kind of like the normal show where we get the title and musical theatre styles and all this stuff that and then we'd perform a show. And the kids were really bored. And what we realised was kids are not impressed by grown-ups making things up. What they're impressed about is getting to tell grown-ups what to do. So so that's when we started. But essentially, our show is a massive game of what happens next. Mm-hmm. So we get the name of the characters, and it's usually, we don't prescribe anything. It's just like, who's this character? And it often is Harry Potter or some kind of Pokemon. And then we'll play that character, and we'll just make up a song for them. And then, we just go like, and who did they meet next? And we're like, a biscuit called Harold. And we're like, okay, great, I'm Harold the Biscuit. And it is really fun. Because in a sense, we're having to work less hard because the kids are doing the story work for us. So it's really fun just watch. And they wrap it up like, if you think how hard it is for grown-ups to learn narrative so that we can improvise stories, if you think when you learn long-form improv and you're like, okay, 5-point hero journey, okay, and you're doing, it's a different kind of story. And where kids, they just do it. They'll be like, okay, so the tiger needs to return back to the island. Well, of course, the penguin makes friends with the biscuit and they live happily ever after. They know how to wrap a story up. And the other thing we did that changed was when we first started, we would be quite moral, as in like a kid would be like, what happens to the penguin? They'd be like, he gets his eyes pulled out. And you'd be like, I don't think so. I don't think we pull a penguin's eyes out, do we, boys and girls? But actually, we realised we had to start pulling penguins' eyes out. So you got to do it. And so we started like killing people. There was this amazing kids show we were in Singapore on tour, and there was like 400 kids in this theatre. And we were going up a mountain. And then we're like, what happens up the mountain? It's like a big mountain, load of mountain. They're like, they all get killed by an avalanche. And so we all died. And then the narrator was like, oh, everybody's dead. What are we going to do? And you could see all the kids like just like looking at each other going, oh. And then one of them just put their hands up and went, they all come back to life. There was such a great moment where they went, oh yeah, they've realised the story can't happen if there's no one to do the story, if everyone's dead. So it was really, I really loved that moment. Because their little innocent face as they realised, okay, maybe killing everyone, it wasn't the brightest idea.
That's great. Another thing with other people that you're talking about in these shows, for most of them anyway, just from observing from the outside, everybody's very much involved in doing lots of different projects and making their own stuff. And I'm always just interested to talk to people on the podcast about how important making your own stuff is, as opposed to trying to get somebody who'll ask you to do something. How important has that been in your development and your career?
When I first started doing comedy, I had a very rigid plan that I was going to become very famous by the age of 29, and I would have my own TV show and I would be Victoria Wood. And my comedy mentor was Neil Malarkey, who's one of the Comedy Store players. And I just remember him being like, but he just said, whatever you do, make your own work. Just keep making your own work. Whatever happens, doesn't matter how many auditions you get, how many this or that, make your own work. And And every time I had an audition and didn't get the part, or had another run-in with whoever, I'd send him an email, be like, "It's rubbish, it's so hard." And he'd just reply, "Yes. So keep making sure you're making your own work." And he was so right. It was such great advice, because if you're not making something that feels true and feels like a real expression of yourself, then you can easily disintegrate in this cruel industry. So making sure there's something that you can say, that is mine, and again, not putting that on. It has to become the biggest, most successful. It doesn't have to be like a 90s film success of those kind of. So even my book, like that's a great thing, and I'm really proud of it. I would not have thought I was going to write a book about Improv Your Life. Actually, I thought I was just doing a little course that. Because I was interested in it, so the intention was, I'm just going to explore improv as a life skill. So I think having things you're working on because they come from a truth, rather than things you're working on because you're hoping they're going to make you a star, is the simplest yet hardest lesson of show business.
And there's a certain element of just experience and maturity in that, I think, isn't there?
Yeah, because. That. I think you can say it when you're younger, as in I think you can like read it and know that it's true, but until you've kind of had your heart broken a few times, you go like, oh yeah, no, now I know why that lesson is so important, actually. And a lot of my friends who went to drama school and did straight acting, and were just would get call from their agent, have an audition, and that was as far as their commitment to acting went. They've all pretty much given up performing. And I think so even if it's the tiniest thing, even if it's, I'm going to keep learning new songs for my portfolio, whatever, I'm going to write some songs, I'm going to research the history of all of these, where all these songs came from, whatever it is. I think anything that gives you a sense of a deeper connection to the work you're doing is vital.
And the thing is, we're supposed to like this stuff, aren't we? That's like, I think it's quite easy to forget you're trying to make a career and do all those things. You can lose a little bit of the fact that hopefully the reason you started writing songs or being on stage or gardening or whatever it is because you really loved it. And I think it's always worth trying to reconnect with that, whether it's learning something new. For me, so like with the music side of things, it's like for about 6 months, I didn't listen to any music for pleasure. And then you sort of go, I'm supposed to like music, I should probably listen to a bit of it. And then there'll just be the one album that you happen across and you go, oh yeah, guitars are great, aren't they? Like, I just haven't really thought about it for a while. And perhaps that's one of the other advantages of this period of not being able to do our normal things, is that when they come back, I wonder if we'll have slightly more open eyes on them.
Yeah, I think we will. It will take us at least 2 weeks before we start moaning about matinees again. But no, I think both those things. I think first of all, we've had essentially an exclusion diet where they've taken away all these things. So we're like, oh, actually, those two things, I didn't really miss them, but I missed that so bad, and I'm going to never take that for granted ever again. But also, it's given us time to sort of replenish the pond in the artist's way. I don't know if you've read that, but Julia Cameron, she talks about overfishing your pond, and she's like, so we all burn out again quite early on because we're like, I'm going to do 17 shows this week, and I'm going to sing all these songs, and I'm going to write all these songs, and and you're doing so much stuff, you're not actually giving yourself time to replenish the pool of inspiration. And she says, so often we're overfishing our pond. and I say that to myself. If I'm tired, I go, have you overfished your pond, babe?
Well, that's the other side of doing your own stuff, isn't it? And trying to be alive to so many. And for me, it's just been interested in different things, So yeah, I could do a podcast. Oh, I want to write loads of songs. Oh, I want to be on stage. I want to be an actor. And it's all great because it's all stuff that I love. But there are those moments where you think, what's the other analogy? Digging oil wells. I've just got so far with that one. We'll stop there and move over here. And we never quite get to that the oil scene. But, I think, fuck it. If you're interested in things, why not study them and why not do them?
Well, I think, again, it comes back to knowing why you're doing things. So going, am I stopping digging this oil well because I'm scared that if I go that far and then it doesn't work out, I would have wasted my time? Or am I avoiding or am I finished?
Mm-hmm.
Just checking in with that is a really helpful thing to do.
And those points of view will change over time, I guess, as well. I think I'd heard a thing that Carrie had said, actually, possibly, I can't remember which podcast it was, talking about that thing again of doing your own stuff. And then there are voices who, when you have a bit of mainstream success or whatever happens, you'll have voices encouraging you to stop doing your own stuff. And it's sort of that battle that people have of, I've built this and it's really good and I enjoy it, versus this amazing opportunity that we kid ourselves will be the thing to go for. I wonder if you've encountered that and what kind of your reflections on that would be.
Well, I think, I think you could easily get into doing lots of, say, if you had TV success, you could easily just get offered loads of TV parts that you don't really want to do. So to go back to Friends, I believe Joey Tribbiani, Matt LeBlanc,
Mm-hmm.
He said, so he sort of disappeared after Joey for quite a long time before he did episodes. And everyone was like, oh, he's probably having a breakdown. He's probably doing this. And he was like, no, I just wanted to take some time. And everyone was like, you're crazy. Because obviously he would have been offered a horrendous amount of horrific films, all that we'd now be able to watch on Netflix. But so to me, like, that's a really brave thing to do, because we're also so trained, you know, like Pavlov's dog, to be like, a part, a thing, we must do it. You know, we're freelance, we're used to things not coming, so we're, you know, it's feast or famine. So having the bravery when you're offered, so I can imagine Cariad was probably offered a lot of TV presenting or things that she was like, yeah, I could do that, I have got the skills, but is that really what I want to do? Would I only be saying yes because I'm scared that nothing else will come along? So my reflection would be, it takes a lot of strength to say no when you're offered a platter of a slightly easier, less satisfying life.
Which comes back to what you mentioned earlier, I guess, of being on stage when you know you don't need to be, and say no to things when you don't have to. Yeah, and you know the example of a bit of fame, it's not even, it happens, so with stand-up, you start doing quite well on the circuit, and so within the circuit you suddenly get offered all these gigs, and a bit of you goes, I have to say yes to all the gigs. So then you're gigging 5 nights a week, but then you never have any time to write new material, so then actually you start to go stagnant because you're always doing the same 20 because you're scared that if you don't do the good 20, then they'll never book you again. Yeah, so it happens even quite near the beginning as well, is you don't have to do all the gigs. Leave some space for other people. Great. Pippa, that's been so fascinating. Thank you so much for taking the time to chat to me. Remind us the name of the book and the best way that people can get in touch with you or check out what you're up to.
The book is called Improv, Your Life, an improviser's guide to embracing whatever life throws at you. And it is available from all of the places, but if you go to hive.co.uk, you'll be supporting local bookshops. If you are listening to this and you're not based in the UK, there's a bookdepository.com is the best place to buy it from. It's also available as an audiobook, if that's your preferred way of reading. I am on Twitter and Instagram at I am Pippa Evans, and currently I'm reading a bit of my book every day on Instagram, so come and join me. And
I did notice as well that Showstopper have a few live streams coming up as well, and you're doing a book event live stream, I think. Oh yeah,
well done, Robert. You know more about my life than I do. You are planning my life. This is so I'm doing a book event on the 18th of March with Fane. It's called Fane, but so if you just, I think I've put it on my website now. So if you go on my website, pippaevans.com, you'll find a link. That's like a online book launch, partly workshop thing. And I do teach workshops as well. So if you want to come and do a workshop, you can find them there. And Showstopper, the improvised musical, does live streams. At the moment, I think we do it once a month. We're obviously also having to be very agile with the roadmap. And so we'll find out. But if you go to showstopper.com, Showstopperthemusical.com. I literally just said this about an hour ago and I forgot. I can't remember that. Just look up Showstopper the Musical. You'll find it. Yes. And come watch us online from wherever you are.
And out of interest then, although I have already said bye, but just a question that's occurred to me. How are the live streams working then? Are you guys together in a room and then taking suggestions on,
So there's 4 of us, 4 actors sat around the room. It's like a big theatre. And the theatre's got that rake seating, like schools have, where you can push it back in.
Nice.
So that's pushed right in. We've got 4 seats, 2.5 or 3 meters from each other. We've got the host character. We've each got a camera on our face, and then we've got the band, which is a pianist and percussion. And then we have the sound tech, Oscar, he's stuck in the kitchen. And then Damo, who's in charge of making sure that we're all safe and everything's working. He has to stand at the top of a ladder. So to make sure that we're all distanced. So we're all in the same room. And that's because we decided that there was no way we could do, what we deliver, without being in the same room with each other. There's no recording device currently that doesn't have a good enough, good enough problem with lag. That's not the correct sentence, but doesn't have a sufficient way of not having lag that we wouldn't be able to improvise in real time. And then that's beamed into the internet and people watch it on YouTube. So there's one other person in the room who is the person who sits on the chat and chats with the people. And so I've done that a few times. And the first time I did it, there was maybe 400 people watching. Wow. And so if you imagine 400 people are watching, then you've got maybe 150 people will be writing something. So it was quite fun. The last one we did, we had 1,200 people watching. So the chat was and I've never had to work so hard in my life. Just sat there, just staring, almost not blinking, having to go through. And we encourage people. So if we say, what's a musical style we want? And someone says Hamilton, rather than having 1,000 people say Hamilton, what we prefer is if someone says Hamilton and then someone says, yes, great idea, second to Hamilton, third to Hamilton. But it means that if you've got that many people and it's scrolling, you have to then scroll back to try and figure out who the hell said Hamilton first, so that you can go, oh, thank you, Imelda, for your suggestion of Hamilton. It's quite funny trying to manage the chat when there's that many people. But we figured it out. So, lots of fun.
Great. Pippa, thank you so much for taking the time to chat to me. I've really enjoyed that.
Thank you, Robert. It's been a joy.
Thank you for listening. I hope you enjoyed that. Join us next time on the Robert Lane Creative Careers podcast. Until then, please subscribe, rate and review, and have a look at robertlanemusic.co.uk to see the other projects I'm working on. Thank you. Goodbye.